A poem by Charles Baudelaire. Tristesse de la lune. Ce soir, la lune rêve avec plus de paresse, ainsi qu'une beauté sur de nombreux coussins, qui d'une main distraite et légère caresse avant de s'endormir le contour de ses seins. Sur le dos satiné de molles avalanches, meurante, il se livre aux longues pâmoisons et promène ses yeux sur les visions blanches qui, montant dans l'azur comme des florissants. Quand parfois, sur ce globe, en sa langueur oisive, elle laisse filer une larme furtive, un poète, pieux, ennemi de sommet, dans le creux de sa main prend cette larme pâle, au reflet irisé comme un fragment opale, et la met dans son cœur, loin des yeux du soleil. Sadness of the Moon. English version. Tonight the moon is full of laziness, like a beauty reclining on many cushions before going to sleep, with light and distracted touch caressing the contours of her breasts. Upon the satin backs of soft avalanches, she abandons herself to the touch of her own hands and faintly looks down upon pale white visions that climb into space like tropical vines. From time to time, in her lonely delirium, she lets a quick tear shoot across the sky, and a pious poet, awake all through the night, takes this pale tear like a fragment of opal into the palm of his hand, and places it within his heart, far from the eyes of the sun. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to the 63rd show in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the moon and starlit lake country of New York State. This is your poet and poetorialist, Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. Last week, we explored different dimensions of dreaming, from the literal to the lyrical, imaginal and metaphorical. This week, I thought we'd take a trip together to the moon and stars, to places lunar and stellar, places I felt invitingly luminous, numinous, and poetic. Encounters I hope may engage and enchant you, all or many of us listening, sensing in. So let's telescope into some chosen musings and discoverings. So I thought we might start with, from Brain Pickings, on the first surviving photograph of the moon, John Adams Whipple, and how the birth of astrophotography married immortality and impermanence. With a dual serenade to being and non-being, they say, composed in glass, metal, and stardust. Well, in 1847, the Harvard College Observatory acquired a colossal telescope dubbed the Great Refractor. It would remain the most powerful in America for 20 years. Enraptured by the imaging potential of that mighty instrument, observatory director William Bond befriended the daguerreotypist John Adams Whipple, who lived from 1822 to 91. Whipple thought of photography as a figurative art rather than a technical craft, but he applied it to the advancement of science. The two men began a series of collaborations that lit the dawn of astrophotography. For 4 years into it, the 30-year-old Whipple would awe the world with his stunning photographs of celestial objects, particularly his photographs of the moon. It began what would become the world's largest collection of astrophotography plates at the Harvard College Observatory. And from this vast visual library, a team of women known as the Harvard Computers would wrest pioneering insight into the nature of the universe, patiently analyzing and annotating the glass plates that today number 500,000. I thought that was fascinating. There's a book, too, to tell you about. It's the life life of Edwin Hubble, the boy whose head was filled with stars. I'm sure you know his name. His Hubble's law staggers the imagination with the awareness that even our most intimate celestial companion, the moon, is slowly moving away from us every day, about as fast as your fingernails grow. Hubble sent the human mind spinning with the swirl of gratitude and terror at the awareness that it is all a temporary miracle. Out in the hills of Missouri, under the star-salted sky, suddenly so much more proximate and alive, questions filled the wonder-stricken young Edwin, questions that become a sing-song refrain throughout the book as his life unfolds toward their answers. Only after his father's death does Hubble pursue his dream to study astronomy, completing a degree and taking as his first job a position at Mount Wilson Observatory, home to the largest then telescope in the world. With it, he identifies previously unseen stars within Andromeda, and drawing on Leavitt's technique for calculating their distance, suddenly realizes that they were much, much farther than previously thought, so far that they could not be within the Milky Way, which meant that there were other galaxies in the universe beyond our own, a staggering revision of the limits of knowledge. Well, we must thank Mr. Hubble for that, Edwin Hubble. I thought, and sort of a weave with that was Adrienne Rich's poem, Planetarium. She wrote this thinking of Caroline Herschel from 1750 to 1848, who was an astronomer and sister of William and others. Apparently quite a pioneer in her own way. I had not heard of her. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Here's her poem, Planetarium. A woman in the shape of a monster in the shape of a woman. The skies are full of them. A woman in the snow among the clocks and instruments, or measuring the ground with poles in her 98 years to discover 8 comets. She whom the moon ruled like us, levitating into the night sky, riding the polished lenses. Galaxies of women, there doing penance for impetuousness. Ribs chilled in those spaces of the mind. And I, virile, precise, and absolutely certain from the mad webs of Oranisborg, encountering the nova, every impulse of light exploding from the core as life flies out of us. Tycho whispering at last, let me not seem to have lived in vain. What we see, and seeing is changing, the light that shrivels a mountain and leaves a man alive, heartbeat of the pulsar, heart sweating through my body, the radio impulse pouring in from Taurus. I am bombarded yet. I have been standing all my life in the direct path of a battery of signals, the most accurately transmitted, most untranslatable language in the universe. I am a galactic cloud, so deep, so involuted that a light wave could take 15 years to travel through me, and has taken. I am an instrument in the shape of a woman trying to translate pulsations into images for the relief of the body and the reconstruction of the mind. Thank you, Adrienne Rich. I did not know the next fact, but it's about ancient Aboriginal astronomy from Mount Kola, Australia. An ancient rock engraving shows Aboriginals used their advanced knowledge of the stars to hunt and gather. How about that? It is acknowledged, this is from atlasobscura.com. It is acknowledged that Australian Aboriginal culture is heavily spiritual and symbolic, but a rock engraving in a national park near Sydney suggests that the indigenous belief system represents a deep knowledge of the sky and the motion of the bodies within it. Scientists at the Australia's Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation have presented the hypothesis that Aborigines, whose existence stretches back unbroken for more than 50,000 years, could have been the world's first astronomers. I love that. Something sort of tangentially related, I suppose, and telescopically speaking, is Maria Popova of Brain Pickings, the founder of that, had a commentary in praise of the telescopic perspective, a reflection on living through turbulent times. You could look that up by that title. An interesting longer read, slightly longer, but she She tells us that the 1977 mission NASA launched with the scientific objective of photographing the planets of the outer solar system, which furnished the very first portrait of our cosmic neighborhood. Human eyes had never before been laid on the arresting aquamarine of Uranus, on Neptune's stunning deep blue orb, on the splendid fury of Jupiter's great red spot, a storm more than threefold the size of our entire planet, raging for 300 years, the very existence of which dwarfs every earthly trouble. But the Voyager also had another, more romantic mission. Aboard it was the Golden Record, a time capsule of the human spirit, encrypted in binary code on a 12-inch gold-plated copper disc, containing greetings in the 54 most populous human languages, and one from the humpback whales, 117 images of life on Earth, and a representative selection of our planet's sounds, from an erupting volcano to a kiss to Bach, and a Bulgarian folk song, which, by the way, happens to be Popova's home country. And on Valentine's Day of 1990, just after Bulgaria's communist regime was finally defeated, and nearly half a century of reign, the Voyager took the now iconic image of Earth, known as the, quote, pale blue dot, a grainy pixel, a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam, as Carl Sagan, or I think it might be Sagan, so poetically put it when he immortalized the photograph in his beautiful pale blue dot monologue from his book Cosmos, a great masterwork of perspective and a timeless reminder that, quote, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, end quote, lived out their lives on this pale blue dot. And every political conflict, war we've ever fought, have waged over a fraction of this grainy pixel, barely perceptible against the cosmic backdrop of endless lonesome space. Thank you, Maria Popova. Okay, well, from there, why don't we have this bit of commentary from an Australian journalist. We were talking about the Aborigines, but here's a contemporary commentator. I thought this was an interesting cultural counterpoint to a lot of the push of progress and exploration and so on that's characterized so much of our history, yes, of empires at least. So this is Caitlyn Johnson who wrote this in recent times. I'm pushing against a cultural dogma that's been mainstream doctrine for generations, but I really find all this blather about adventure and the indomitable human spirit of exploration quite tedious and idiotic when it comes to space colonization. We've got creatures swimming in our own oceans with brains many times larger than our own, and we're killing them all off before we've even developed any kind of real theory about what they're doing with all that extra gray matter. There are parts of the moon that are better explored than vast expanses of our own seas. We don't even know what consciousness is, and science is largely uninterested in answering this question. I don't believe the spirit of exploration and adventure is what's driving our longing to break for the stars. I think it's nothing but garden variety escapism. Well, there's a little food for thought. Well, that brought to mind a poem of mine from way back when, from March 2001. I, for some reason, was inspired to write this at that moment in New York City. Shooting the Moon is the title. There's a bit of rain falling. Actually, it's quite lovely. It's cooled off. It was 100 degrees here in the Lake Country, and we needed the coolness coming in and the rain. Refresh everything. Shooting the moon. They fly through the galaxy, searching for new worlds, for solar flares and supernovas, unsure of the controls, but determined to find their way in the dark. Although they get burned flying too close to the sun, and have their hulls pockmarked by sudden showers of meteors, and go on wild-eyed and weightless chases after shooting stars, only to find the fizzle, they're undeterred until the first sign of Ursa Major, where they make a sharp turn and wisely decide to steer their silver ships back to Earth. I didn't want to get into too many sort of scientific facts about the moon, but I thought there were some interesting ones that I just wanted to pluck out for us a few fascinating ones, and some ones you may not know about. Wikipedia tells us that the moon is Earth's only natural satellite. Both the prominence of the moon in the earthly sky and its regular cycle of phases have provided cultural references and influences for human societies throughout history, found in language, calendar systems, art, and mythology. The first artificial object to reach the moon was the Soviet Union's Luna 2 uncrewed spacecraft in 1959, followed by the first successful soft landing by Luna 9 in 1966. And the only human lunar missions to date have been those of the United States Apollo program. You know about that, which landed 12 men on the surface between 1969 and 1972. So, just a little backdrop. But I like this fact about the moon is that it's shaped like a lemon. This is from Mental Floss. It may look perfectly round in the night sky, but it's actually more of an oval shape. It came out wonky billions of years ago when super hot tidal forces shaped its crust, heating up some areas hotter than others to form a lemon shape rather than a perfect sphere. Gravitational forces from the Earth have helped to exaggerate the moon's oblong appearance over eons. And, you talked about what landed on the moon, but then there was a note from Atlas Obscura about more personal and sometimes surprising artifacts that orbited the Earth, and some even made the roughly 500,000-mile round-trip journey to the moon. A figurine of a Madonna, an unopened bottle of brandy, and quotes from the likes of Thornton Wilder and John F. Kennedy. Astronaut Rusty Schweikert brought these quotes, as well as a copy of the Declaration of Independence on pieces of lightweight onion skin paper tucked inside his tunic during Apollo 9, an orbital mission that tested the lunar modules. To him, they were pieces of wisdom from Earth that would remain up there on his person, even if he was lost during the mission. So how about that? And one other thing, this was from Reader's Digest, actually. Moon facts. One of the moon facts from the Middle Ages is that scientists and philosophers believed that a full moon caused seizures and influenced episodes of fever and rheumatism. Because of the connection between the moon and unusual behavior, the afflicted were called lunatics, or literally moon sick. Well, if you don't know about, there's a wonderful very vintage film called A Trip to the Moon. And since we are on a trip to the moon and stars together now, I thought you might like to dial it up. I'm sure you could find it on YouTube or elsewhere. It was done in 1902 by a Frenchman, Georges Méliès, and it is fascinating as a colorized version of it. And it's a French adventure short film directed by him. He also is in it, inspired by many sources, including Jules Verne's 1965 novel From the Earth to the Moon. And it follows a group of astronomers who travel to the moon in a cannon-propelled capsule. They explore the moon surface, escape from an underground group of Selenites, lunar inhabitants, and return to Earth with a captive one. Absolutely fascinating. And it was rediscovered not until 1930, when his importance to the history of cinema was beginning to be recognized by film devotees. There's an original hand-colored print that was discovered in 1993 and restored in 2011, and that's the one I would suggest you look at. It was ranked 84th at the 100 greatest films of the 20th century by the Village Voice. It's his best-known film, and the moment the capsule lands in the moon's eye is one of the most iconic and frequently referenced images in the history of cinema. So have a peek at that. All right. Well, I think a little poetry. Just a little water before I go there to that. Under the first full moon of the year of 2018, this is a poem of mine called Lunar Litscape. Lunar Litscape. At precisely 9:25, when the moon, the first and most abundant one of the new year, was perfectly full, thousands of readers, many with mittens, opened their novels and poetry collections, their unfinished mysteries, promising short stories, and began to read by the kliegishly bright lunar light. Some silently, nocturnally, in the outdoor reading rooms they shared with the stars and the owls. Some sotto voceli, others knew friends, even declaimingly up to the moon itself, which was, that night, all wide-eyed, open-eared. And talking about lunar things and eclipses, and Billy Collins has this good poem, as if to demonstrate an eclipse. I pick an orange from a wicker basket and place it on the table to represent the sun. Then down at the other end, a blue and white marble becomes the earth, and nearby I lay the little moon of an aspirin. I get a glass from a cabinet, open a bottle of wine, then I sit in a ladder-back chair, a benevolent god presiding over a miniature creation myth. And I begin to sing a homemade canticle of thanks for this perfect little arrangement, for not making the earth too hot or cold, not making it spin too fast or slow, so that the grove of orange trees and the owl become possible, not to mention the rolling wave, the play of clouds, geese in flight, and the Z of lightning on a dark lake. Then I fill my glass again, and give thanks for the trout, the oak, and the yellow feather, singing the room full of shadows, as sun and earth and moon circle one another in their impeccable orbits, and I get more and more cockeyed with gratitude. Thank you, Billy Collins, for that. There's a poem that I composed for dear friends Roger and Irvie Wu at their house by the sea one February. It was a wonderful night, and there was a snow moon. It's called the snow moon by the Native Americans. And that was in February, Long Beach, New York. The snow moon pours down its fairy tale light onto the sleeping garden dreaming of spring, onto the red-tiled head of the house and all the soft blanketed house dwellers here, onto the faithful old dog, the bright feathered hens, the rows of hats and wine glasses, the jars of healing herbs, into the veins and roots of all the plants growing wild and well here, through all the night darkness, into words of wonder and praise on a snow moon whitened page. And here was a passing fancy of a moment with the moon, one warm wintering time in the Yucatan on the Mayan coast. It's called cold star soup. To our thick soup of stars, we add half a cup of Milky Way and garnish with croutons of moon. So I spoke of Georges Méliès and his fascinating early lunar film, A Trip to the Moon. Well, here's one I made myself imaginarily in my car, my chariot, and maybe you'll have some imaginings of your own kind as a result of our program tonight. This is called Driving to the Moon, and as I drove by, this fancy came into me. On a deep indigo night, end of November night, as it hangs so low and clear over the near bare treetops, over the dark road perforated with white, seeming to drive closer, though knowing there's no closer to get to the half-seen lower or half-suggested upper reaches of the black and blue-white lunar wonder, however fast the speed of my motor or sight, except the fancy of pulling my chariot up to park by a lake-like crater where I lean and look back at the sapphire and emerald-swirled earth through the lens of my clear rear-view mirror. Driving to the moon. Do you know or remember the long-time classic children's book and how back in time you felt about the moon, the moonlight, or still feel its innocence, its quietness, its sweetness? So Margaret Wise Brown wrote the classic Good Night Moon. I thought that would be delightful to share tonight and invoke tonight. Maybe call us back to places or childlike places. Good night, moon. In the great green room, there was a telephone and a red balloon, and a picture of the cow jumping over the moon. And there were 3 little bears sitting on chairs, and 2 little kittens, and a pair of mittens, and a little toy house, and a young mouse, and a comb, and a brush, and a bowl full of mush, and a quiet old lady who was whispering, "Hush. Good night, room. Good night, moon. Good night, cow jumping over the moon. Good night, light and the red balloon. Good night, bears. Good night, chairs. Good night, kittens, and good night, mittens. Good night, clocks, and good night, socks. Good night, little house, and good night, mouse. Good night, comb, and good night, brush. Good night, nobody. Good night, mush. And good night to the old lady whispering, hush. Good night, stars. Good night, air. Good night, noises everywhere. Very sweet. I also thought I don't often read significantly older poets just because, stylistically I think they're less compelling to me, but there were two that came into my thoughts. Let me just have a moment here. Gerard Manley Hopkins wrote this one, The Starlight Night. These are two older poems and poets of starry wonderment and praise and poetic musing. The Starlight Night. Look at the stars. Look up at the skies. Oh, look at all the firefolk sitting in the air. The bright burrows, the circle citadels there. Down in dim woods, the diamond delves, the elves' eyes. The grey lawns cold, where quick gold lies. Wind-beat white beam, airy ables set on a flare. Flake doves sent floating forth at a farmyard scare. Oh, well, it is all a purchase, all is a prize. Buy then, bid then, what? Prayer, patience, alms, vows. Look, a May mess, like an orchard on orchard boughs. Look, March bloom, like on mealed with yellow sallows. These are indeed the barn, within doors house the shocks. This peace-bright paling shuts the spouse, Christ home, Christ and his mother, and all his hallows. Thank you, Gerard Manley Hopkins. And here's one by A.E. Houseman, a Shropshire lad, far in a western brookland. A.E. Houseman. Far in a western brookland, that bred me long ago, the poplars stand and tremble by pools I used to know. There in the windless night-time, the wanderer, marveling why, halts on the bridge to hearken how soft the poplars sigh. He hears, long since forgotten in fields where I was known, here I lie down in London and turn to rest alone. There, by the starlit fences, the wanderer halts and hears my soul that lingers sighing about the glimmering weirs. Thank you, Houseman. There's a lovely old folk song from the Hebrides I was thinking about, and I'll see if I'm up to give you a little rendering of that. It's called The Little Stars of Duna. When I was a little lad, with folly on my lips, fain was I for journeying all the seas in ships. But now across the southern swell, every dawn I hear the little streams of Duna running clear. The little streams of Duna running clear. When I was a young man, before my beard was grey, all to ships and sailormen I gave my heart away. But I'm weary of the sea wind, I'm weary of the foam, and the little stars of Duna call me home. The little stars of Duna call me home. Well, there you have it. Well, as I listened to different songs actually before as I put the program together, Stardust Melody, and I had listened years back in Cobble Hill. I was doing a poet in residency there one May of several that I'd done over the years, and I was listening to this beautiful Hawaiian song that was sort of on shuffle of whatever I had in my collection, and it was so beautiful, and this, as I listened, lilted with it, this poem came, and I used some of the language from the poem, a love song, and it's in Hawaiian, it's I lanakai, at lanakai, And I know we can't speak of the moon, for example, without speaking of moonlight and love and romance. So, Atlanakai, the moonlight memory is forever tender. Kao mai lai luna o ma he lani. While we were dancing on sand so bright, Pukukoi kaua eke ai ai. I gave my love away to you, Atlanakai. See, look up that song. It's quite dreamy. Of course, there's the great Irving Berlin song, yeah? Let's Face the Music and Dance. Do you remember? Fred Astaire, I think for me, most famously, sang that. Many have, but I think the first time I ever heard it and loved it was him singing it. And you remember how it goes? There may be trouble ahead, but while there's moonlight and music and love and romance, let's face the music and dance. Yeah, maybe go back to that, listen to him sing that. Then what about literary lovers and those longing for love in plays and novels and back in time, like Romeo and Juliet, those star-crossed lovers? And, of course, Cyrano de Bergerac. Yeah. And I had done an experiential show of theater on paper I'd created and presented where characters, including him, of all kinds, came to life in body and poetic story. And this was his story. There was a wonderful image. I can share it with you if you send me a note. Happy to send it to you. It's called Cyrano di. Noble man of many talents, gifted poet of many joys, who dreams beyond his large and remarkable nose of being loved, longs for the love of a fair lady, a Roxanne, he can serenade in heart-strung words, first hand, close hand, and until then sits by a sunlit, sometimes moonlit window, wondering when such great love will find him. Cyrano di. Well, as many of you appreciate, moonlight and I associate it with many things, not just romance, but experiences through life that I've had by myself and with others. And, what about you? What are yours, to muse on either now or later? Well, some of them included two wonderful, illuminated, I would say, gents who sprang to mind, and these poems for each of them, actually around their passings, and memories of them and feelings about them. And the first is the old school father of Andy Reid, one of my oldest best friends, and his father's nickname was Bruto, B-R-U-T-O, Bruto Reid. And this poem for him is called Hail and Farewell, for the passing of Bruto Reid. To that great Gatsby gent I first met on a dark lawn cooled with night air and starlight, standing, savoring the fine evening with a blue pluming cigarette and smoking jacket, savoring his country kingdom. To that old school gent, sailed off now into those stars, into a greater lightness, into a greater peacefulness. Hail and farewell. And then I've read this once before for many, many programs back for a different theme, but this fit tonight and he was the indelible father, a true Southern gentleman, character I adored, father of Tom Bryan, another long-time friend down in South Carolina. His dad was Billy Bryan. It's called Flying South. You're flying south now, farther south than you ever dreamed of going, traveling australly and astrally at the speed of infinite bliss, far beyond time and a century of earthly delights. From a young fellow dallying and dancing, to a gentle man husbanding and fathering, to a wise figure doctoring and post-doctorally granddaddying, riding throughout a tide of graciousness and gregariousness that made you a small giant and gave you a glow of famousness in the hearts of friends and family, who see you flying now into the arms of the universe, and taking, as you go, a turn through the Crab Nebula, for the sentimental part of your journey, a sweet sip from the Milky Way, and a hat off to the heavenly ladies from Virgo to Cassiopeia, to your great and guiding southern star, and to the sun that will shine on your face forever. I think of him from time to time with such joy. Amazing man, lives in my molecules. Here's poet and writer Diane Ackerman from her 1976 anthology, The Planets, A Cosmic Pastoral. And aren't comets marvelous, mysterious, magical? Have you ever seen them? Because I've seen a few in my life, and they're always amazing. So she wrote this. It's called On the Other Night, about the comet Goedecke. I don't remember when that one was, but Kohouteke. Last night, while cabbage stuffed with brown sugar, meat, and raisins was baking in the oven, and my potted holly, dying leaf meal from red spider, basked in its antidote malathion, I stepped outside to watch Goedecke passing its dromedary core through the eye of a galaxy, but only found a white blur catnapping under Venus, gauzy, dissolute, and bobtailed as a manx. Pent up in that endless coliseum of stars, the moon was fuller than any Protestant had a right to be. And I said, Moon, if you've got any pull up there, bring me a sun-grazing comet, its long hair swept back by the solar wind, in its mouth a dollop of primordial sputum, a dozing iceberg in whose coma elements collide. Bring me a mojo that's both relict and reliquary. Give me a thrill from that petrified seed. Mars was a stoplight in the north sky, the only real meat on the night's black bones. And I said, Mars, why be parsimonious? You've got a million tricks stashed in your orbital back hills. Chicory suns bobbing in viridian lagoons, quasars dwindling near the speed of light, pinwheel, dumbbell, and impacted galaxies, epileptic nuclei a mile long, vampiric moons, dicotyledon suns, whirling dust bowls of umbilical snow, Milky Ways that on the slant look like freshly fed pythons. How about that? That's pretty juicy. Yeah. Diane Ackerman, thank you for that. She also talked about the spirituality of wonder without religion, which I especially thought that. I wanted to read that, so I pulled out a little bit for us about that. She said, there's a terrible hollowness and emptiness at the core of society right now that comes from our trying to exile ourselves farther and farther from nature. Nature is something that most people visit on weekends. Yet we evolved to be intimately tied to nature, to feel whole and natural when we belong to nature, and to respond to that ever-changing fantasia of the seasons. The harder that we try to deny that heritage, the more alienated we become. I have no trouble using a word like holy to describe a place in the wilderness where I might feel an intimate relationship with the cosmos. Well said. Thank you, Diane Ackerman. Alice Oswald, going farther into the starscape right for a moment, shall we say, Alice Oswald has this poem called Various Portents. Various stars, various kings, various sunset signs, cursory insights, many minute attentions, many knowledgeable watchers, much cold, much overbearing darkness, various long midwinter glooms, various solitary and terrible stars, many frosty nights, many previously unseen sky flowers, many people setting out, some of them kings, all clutching at stars, more than one north star, more than one south star, several billion elliptical galaxies, bubble nebulae, binary systems, various dust lanes, various routes through varying thicknesses of dark, many tunnels into deep space, minds going back and forth, many visions, many digitally enhanced heavens, all kinds of glistenings being gathered into telescopes, fireworks, gasworks, white-streaked works of dusk, works of wonder and or water, snowflakes, stars of frost. Various dazed astronomers dilating their eyes, various astronauts setting out into laughterless earthlessness, various 5,000-year-old moon maps, various blind men feeling across the heavens in braille, various gods making beautiful works in bronze, brooches, crowns, triangles, cups, and chains, and all sorts of dry stone stars put together without mortar. many wise men remarking the irregular weather, many exile energies, many low-voiced followers, watches of wisp of various glowing spindles, soothsayers, hunters in the high country of the zodiac, seafarers tossing, tied to a star, various people coming home, some of them kings, various headlights, 2 or 3 children standing or sitting on the low wall, various winds, the sea wind, the sound-laden winds of evening, blowing the stars toward them, bringing snow. And that was from her various part. That's from her collection, Spacecraft Voyager 1. In case you want to look that up. Well, this is one of mine on the good fortune of the heavens we get to behold here on Earth as we're alive during our lives up there for all of us. It's called Speaks the Star. Through time, space, histories. Simply giving itself, sharing its light, its distant yet deeply present peace, quiet through each night, asking nothing in return, getting everything in a return of simple, eternal wonder. Speaks the Star. Carl Sagan, or some say Sagan. How about him? He was a wise fellow and full of wonder, endless wonder, that man. And he spoke about mystery and why common sense blinds us to the universe and how to live with the unknown. We are bathing, he said, in mystery and confusion on many subjects, and I think that will always be our destiny. The universe will always be much richer than our ability to understand it. He also said this, you saw Earth for the first time as a tiny blue ball floating in space. You realized that there were other similar worlds far away of different size, different color, and constitution. You got the idea that our planet was just one in a multitude. I think there are 2 apparently contradictory and still very powerful benefits of that cosmic perspective. The sense of our planet as one in a vast number, and the sense of our planet as a place whose destiny depends upon us. Thank you, Carl Sagan. What about the ineffable longing we can experience under the stars? Does that exist in you? Has that existed? Maybe it will if it hasn't yet. Galway Cannell wrote this poem that I felt resonated with that. It's called Ruins Under the Stars. All day under acrobat swallows I have sat, beside ruins of a plank house sunk to its windows in burdock and raspberry canes, the roof dropped, the foundation broken in, nothing left perfect but the axe marks on the beams. A paper in a cupboard talks about mugwumps. In a V letter, a farm boy in the Marines has, quote, tasted battle. The apples are pure acid on the tangle of boughs. The pasture has gone to popple and bush. Here on this perch of ruins, I listen for the crunch of the porcupines. Overhead, the Skull Hill rises, crossed on top by the stunted apple. Infinitely beyond it, older than love or guilt, lie the stars ready to jump and sprinkle out of space. Every night under the millions of stars, an owl dies or a snake sloughs his skin. But what if a man feels the dark homesickness for the inconceivable realm? Thank you, Galway Cannell. Then there's Linda Hogan's poem, Lost in the Milky Way, Lost in the Milky Way. Some of us are like trees that grow with a spiral grain as if prepared for the path of the Spirit's journey to the world of all souls. It is not an easy path. A dog stands at the opening constellation past the great helping hand. The dog wants to know, did you ever harm an animal, hurt any creature? Did you take a life you didn't eat? This is the first on your map. There is another my people made of the great beyond that lies farther away than this galaxy. It is a world that can't be imagined by ordinary means. After this first one, the next could be a map of forever. It could be a cartography shining only at some times of the year, like a great web of finery some spider pulled from herself to help you recall your true following, your first white breath in the cold. The next door opens, and an old woman counts your scars. She's interested in how you have been hurt and not in anything akin to sin. From between stars are the words we now refuse. Loneliness, longing, whatever suffering might follow your life into the sky. Once those are gone, the life you had against your own will, the hope, even the prayers take you one more bend around the river of sky. Thank you, Linda Hogan. So that brought to mind Sean O'Brien's poem, The Calm, Irish poet. It speaks of the supernatural and the beyond, the great beyond. It's called The Calm. At the mouth of the river, moon, stars, an arctic calm. The twin lights at the end of the piers revolving with the smoothness we expect of supernatural machinery. Seen from down here on the beach, the harbored ocean slowly tilts, like a mirror discreetly manhandled by night from the giant room it was supposed to occupy forever. The mind says, now, but the stars on their angelic gimbals roll and fade, a tide of constellations breaking nowhere. Every night about this time, strike up the band. In the tumble-down bar, the singer has fallen from stardom and grace, but though her interests nowadays are wholly secular, she can still refer back to the angels. And knowing that song, we share a moment with the saved before we leave to make the crossing. No captain, no ferry, but cross we shall, believe you me. Thank you, Sean O'Brien. Well, we're going to wind out over a kind of small handful left of things for us. So as we sort of slowly or less slowly wind out soon, for now, a few last lunar and stellar poems. This is by Rilke. I've always appreciated him and reminding us and calling us to beautiful places of being, I would say, this one. He wrote this in Paris in 1909 from his uncollected poems. Forget, and let us live now only this, how the stars pierce through cleared nocturnal sky, how the moon's whole disk surmounts the gardens. We've sensed so long already how the darkness breeds many mirrors, how a gleam takes shape, a white shadow in the radiance of night. But now, let us cross over and invest this world where everything is lunar. Thank you, Anna Maria Rilke. On a lunar eclipse came this poem of mine in the countryside 2 Januaries ago, and a deep sense of wonder and connection. I think part of what's weaving through all this for me, and maybe some of you, is a sense of connection, of timeless connection, and timely connection for us right now. I think the more connected we can feel to the natural world, the better we're going to be in general, and through these times we're still in, these strange times. This is Blood Moon. The only thing warm tonight in the deep winter sky, and soon to occlude, the wolf moon, ice moon, old moon. During its dousing, a time for howling out our truth to the star-studded universe, so deeply listening, offering up wonder for these rare passages of our planetary nature, like generations of strangers, of ancestors before us, divining the light inside our shadow as it passes so silently, so mysteriously, red-bloodedly over the earth. There's so much to be said about the moon and the stars, isn't there? And so many rich associations with the greater heavens, the constellations, and the eternal wholeness, I would say, and for me, peacefulness that they bring to the spirit, can bring. And I wrote this back in the Cyclades in the Aegean, on the island of Kea, in the harbor at Gorizia, one night, as I looked out from the place I was sitting overlooking the harbor. Stars have fallen. Stars have fallen tonight, silvered down around the harbor, spilled onto the soft surrounding hillsides where they coolly and whitely constellate, where they create a son et lumière with the music of the wind and the waves, the gentle rustle of oak and grape leaves, until they dim and dissolve in the soon arriving light of day. Stars have fallen. Well, maybe they'll fall tonight in good ways, not just shooting stars. As we come into the now so ripe summertime, this is a new poem of mine from a recent meander up on mid-coast Maine, where all is so clear and pure and resonant, and the heavens included, land to sea to sky. It's called Pines and Stars. Days and nights of pines and stars, of blue bays, white schooners, top-down vintage motor cars, mornings of outdoor showers, lupins, pure down east air, evenings of first fireflies, loons, clear falling light, and everywhere oceans of native pines, everywhere oceans of votive stars. Let us speak of the stars we follow and can or feel compelled to in our lives. What is your North Star? I know what mine is these days, and I've been following it very faithfully. So this is for all of you who want to reaffirm your following or contemplate your following of what that might be. The North Star. It doesn't shine far off. It's closer than you think. It shines clearly, prominently, not outside, but deep inside you, night and day, in the great constellation of your being, your vos major, a constant presence, Polaris, in your crown, fixed and bright enough to navigate by, circumnavigate with, to follow, if or when you're ready and willing, on a luminous, longed-for way of life, heart, self, terrestrial and celestial, your ever-faithful, providential North Star. Let's be grateful for such natural gifts. Yeah, the moon and more. This is the white elephant. Like the snow, like a cloud, or the moon, the song of a bird, the laughter of a child, the rare and sacred gifts that come our way in this world, from nature, from life beyond culture, from the oceans of our imaginations, that need not be useful at all to be valuable, whose beauty, transcendent beauty, intangibility, and freedom from practicality make them all worthy, worth our appreciating on any sunlit day, on any starlit night. And last, maybe let us remember the constancy and transcendency of those celestial and terrestrial realms that surround us always. This is called centuries of winters. Centuries of winters, centuries of wars, centuries of civilizations and conquistadors have not stopped the tides from falling, or the moon from rising, the beating of birds' wings or women's hearts, the heat of the day, the absolute silence, solitude of the stars. Thank you, each and all again, for listening in, floating and feeling in, and taking this trip together to the moon and the stars. And thanks to all of you faithful listeners who feel in out there each week, and to all you newcomers, your enthusiasms together mean a great deal as I seek to nourish spirits and uplift hearts and spur greater self-awareness and aliveness with these broadcasts and my poetic arts. Donations of any kind are always welcome, which you can make by PayPal or Venmo, or directly through my site, or by mail to me simply at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. Those patrons interested in hosting me on their property as a poet in residence for up to a month or more later this summer, fall, or winter, to shape a new flight of poetic art in their surroundings and dedicate the outpourings to them, well, I gratefully invite your invitations. I'm also wide open to kindred fellow artists to collaborate on projects from the musical to the theatrical, and producers, directors, or others seeking an especially poetic voice and spirit. Meanwhile, you can listen to any of my live broadcasts online as replays with all their live energy in there. I hope you'll lean in again next week or soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to drinking in, pondering, embracing the silent and salient, close and distant wonders of the moon and the stars, the eternally beautiful gifts of the lunar and the stellar, and all they inspire in us, in you. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.